So about a year ago, I made a video about replacing my gaming PC with a Steam Deck. And I've come to realize that after hundreds of hours going back and forth between the two, there is no perfect solution. The strengths of one side are usually the weaknesses of the other. But it starts to raise the question, if I can get similar performance that I get with my main PC, but with the added flexibility of a portable, why not combine them? So this is the Lian Li Dan E3, which is roughly a 26-liter case. You can pick up either of these for around 70 bucks. And generally, they give you the flexibility in configuring your build depending on the hardware configuration you go with. Obviously, we don't need any additional parts like a motherboard or CPU cooler, so that gives us a ton of free space to create a docking setup for the Ally X in here. And when you think about it, our part list is also extremely simple. We need a PSU that can supply ample power to our setup, something preferably small that can be mounted out of the way. But the real challenge here is focusing on the bandwidth limitations that running any external graphics card can come with. So my solution is the UT3G, which at least to my knowledge right now is one of the few PCIe Gen 4 adapters that supports Thunderbolt 4 and a bandwidth of 3600. The Ally X also ditched the proprietary XG mobile port for Thunderbolt 4, so theoretically it should be possible to use an adapter like this. Now realistically, you want to use a GPU that makes sense here, being aware of the bottlenecks that would come with the Z1 Extreme. But at first I was curious as to what the limit would be if we use something like a 4090 with the Ally X without as much of a bandwidth restriction like you'd see with other adapters. At this point, we do have to modify the adapter, which is pretty simple. The PCB is mounted to a 5mm thick acrylic sheet with a few fasteners holding it down. We also need to remove the vertical mounting hardware since we're going to install a giant GPU in here, so shaving down the adapter's thickness is kind of a must for optimizing the space. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. The adapter does require a 24-pin motherboard cable, which since the connector was so far away from the power supply, I had to use a sleeved extension. If I ran this in any other configuration, the 4090 and Ally X would basically just end up smashed together, so the case ended up working out really well. It's not really optimized for the setup in the first place, obviously. I haven't added any additional intake or exhaust fans just to get a baseline benchmark as to what the temps would look like without any additional cooling. Because if nothing works, it won't even matter anyways. Which initially, upon powering it all up and switching all the config dials to automatic, things were not plug and play. The 4090 was being recognized within Device Manager, but that was about as far as it would go. I tried installing new NVIDIA drivers, different BIOS and driver versions for the Ally, and ultimately fell into this rabbit hole of trying to get it to work. I did stumble across someone else having this issue with an NVIDIA GPU and recommended using Windows Canary, then using AME, which is an open source software that can modify and create alterations to the install using a script playbook. It basically removes a lot of the bloatware and unnecessary services that come within Windows that could be possibly conflicting with getting this to work and running stable. Then once that was good to go, I ran the NVIDIA Error 43 fixer, which again irons out any additional NVIDIA eGPU compatibility issues. And there we go. I was not sure what to expect from this thing in terms of performance. I opened up and ran CUDA-Z to check our current bandwidth and that we were getting the full advertised 3600. GPU-Z also showed that the speed was running at X4 4.0, and a quick brute force Cyberpunk benchmark showed us pulling altogether almost 400 watts with the 4090. My main concern was how much this would actually utilize the card. Also, considering since the adapter doesn't support power delivery, I could not get the Ally X to continue charging with this whole setup, so it was just running on battery. So it was essentially just draining the battery while using it docked in this setup. Now the workaround was using a Ugreen dock for the peripherals with another 100-watt power source. Altogether, the Z1 Extreme was pulling roughly 40 to 50 watts plus the 4090, which I measured almost 500 watts out of the wall for the whole setup. So yeah, we have to optimize this as much as possible to eliminate any additional bandwidth restrictions, which included disabling the iGPU on the Ally. I also plugged in an external monitor directly into the 4090 and then disabled the integrated screen so that the image was not being routed back and taking any additional bandwidth. Altogether, there's only so much you can do at the mercy of absolutely being CPU bottlenecked and limited by the adapter, but when comparing the stock Ally X to this setup, it was a mind-blowing difference. Keep in mind, all the gameplay I've shown footage of is in 4K. I did test a few different titles with ray tracing, DLSS, and to no surprise, it essentially supercharged the Ally X. But the real answer to all of this is that Thunderbolt has its limitations. It's not Oculink, you're not getting the same performance you'd get out of a traditional setup here, but it's still pretty cool to see the potential future for performance enhancements, really creating an eGPU all-in-one dock would be super interesting. Now, who would actually buy an $1,800 GPU knowing they're not gonna get the most out of it? I don't know. Clearly a 4090 is not a realistic use case scenario for this. It's just what I had in my main PC. that I was able to test. But it does open the gate for more realistic applications out there. More than anything, this really goes to show that if you have a more comparable graphics card available, either something like an older 3080 to 4060, you could get something out of a setup like this. There's a lot of really good options in the used market that could totally supercharge your existing Ally X, especially if you're considering building a PC in the first place, but want that added flexibility of taking your games on the go. Same goes for the case. If you have older hardware lying around and you want to take advantage of it, you can pick up one of these adapters and maybe even make something like a Steam machine. I still have a lot of testing to do with a setup like this, especially getting the drivers to function properly with Linux, so you could use Bazzite, kind of create a SteamOS machine for the living room, or like a Nintendo Switch on steroids. But yeah, safe to say that this might be on the radar for the future of some gaming setups, where you just take the main unit with you anywhere, then drop that same handheld on a dock at home, and continue your gaming session, but with that added horsepower. Really a setup that gives you the best of both worlds without as many compromises as we have right now. So that's pretty much the video. Please let me know if you want to see a follow-up to this type of video, maybe pick up a more realistic graphics card like a 4060, 3080, something affordable that would make sense as an eGPU for the Ally X. All I know is that right now, this is the best we can do with the bandwidth restrictions we have and the available handhelds. So big thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.